let's take a look at everything that I made in 2024. Oh gosh, how do I put this down? Hello, my name is Emily Crow from The Cozy Crow, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am really excited to talk to you about everything that I made in 2024. And I've got first some stats, and then we're going to walk through everything that I made. I've kind of organized it here. I am not the best record keeper, and so some of my months that I made things are a little bit vague, fuzzy, not quite sure. But I know generally when I made these things, especially because I do a podcast that is mostly monthly throughout the year. I'll make sure to link that playlist down below if you're interested in learning more about all of these projects. But let's just jump right into it. Now today I'm only talking about my finished projects. I'm not going to talk about my whips. If you want to know more about the whips that I'm bringing into this new year, then let me know down below and I can always make a different video where I do a little whip parade, talk about what I'm making, what I'm excited to continue on, and what I am considering frogging. But as far as all the things that I finished in 2024, I made a total of 40 items, and that is less than in previous years. And I think that's indicative of how busy I was with other things. And I'm going to break it down with all of the different types of items that I made. Unsurprisingly, over half of the items I made were socks. 22 of my finished objects were pairs of socks. So technically I had 44 socks, 22 pairs of socks, still more than half of my total items. And then I had 8 neck accessories that I completed, 5 shawls, 2 cowls, and 1 scarf. I also had 1 hat, 1 set of mitts, only 1 garment, 2 toys, and 5 soap savers that were an impromptu thing I threw in at the very end of the year for gifts. When we look at the recipient of what I made, 28 of the things I made were intended for myself or didn't really have a recipient in mind. I just made to make. I made 3 things for my daughter, who is 4. I made my husband 1 thing, and then I have 8 other gifts that I gave, which is more than usual. I'm not necessarily a gift knitter, and so I'm happy with the amount that I did make for others. 4 of the projects I made were included in specific videos on this channel. They were all 4 book box videos where certain yarn dyers have yarn, maybe a project or some goodies inspired by a book that they really like. And on certain pages of that book, you get to open different packages, maybe yarn or other goodies. And it's just a really fun experience to do that. And I really enjoyed vlogging my experiences. And so I'll make sure to link that playlist up above and down below. If you're interested in books and yarn combined, I definitely intend to film more of those types of videos in 2025. But 4 of the projects I made this year were part of that experience of opening book boxes and making patterns associated with them. I made 3 total designs this year that I self-published, 1 towards the beginning of the year, 2 towards the end of the year, and they're all socks. Surprise, surprise. And then 11 of the projects I finished were considered tests that I completed. And then I also had a duplicate that was a second pair of socks from a test I was working on. I didn't include that in my count of 11, but that was another pair that I worked on based on the pattern I tested. When we look at knit versus crochet, I knit 32 finished objects and I crocheted 8 of them. So not too shabby. I've definitely leaned more into knit because I like the aesthetic more. I really love knitting socks, and so that takes up a large portion of what I make. Crochet still has its merits and I still do enjoy crochet. I have some crochet whips that are hanging out here in my room that I can talk about in another video. If again you're interested, let me know and I can definitely film a little whip parade. But I definitely enjoy knitting more. I've just been more drawn to it. I started out crocheting and I've loved my transitioning to knitting more, but I still definitely make time to crochet. All right, so that's all the stats that I calculated. If there's any other questions you have about statistics, what kind of projects I made, let me know down below because I'd be happy to kind of do some math and digging and figure out the answer to your question. But let's just jump into all of the actual makes so I can talk a little bit about each one of them. Oh my gosh. I feel so old. All my things are on the floor and I don't bend like I used to. All right, the first thing I want to talk about, I finished in January. This is the Contrast Blast socks by Stephen West. A wee bit wrinkly. I don't wear them because they're just way too zany for the kind of things I like to wear, but they are nice and cozy because they are colorwork, so it basically is double thick knit. But I really love this color palette, and I'm really proud of picking these colors from my stash. I think they went really well together, and I loved some of these details, especially with like this fun little like cable detail on the cuff. I did like these stair steps. I liked doing this like light stitch pattern on the heel flap, and it was just like a fun experience. I was thinking I was going to participate in Stephen West's mystery knit along for this past year in 2024, and I fell off the bandwagon really quickly. I still am considering making the socks or making a modified version of those socks, but not a priority at this time. So this was a holdover from 2023. I had finished the first sock as part of a video series I was doing as I was vlogging throughout the entire month that this make along was being revealed, and that was actually really fun, but it was a lot of work, and so that was my intention for the 2024 make along, and it didn't happen because it was just too overwhelming for me. So I set that aside, both the video idea and working on the pattern itself. But I was really happy to finish this pair of socks. I used Woolberry Fiber Co. in their BFL sock base, which is a more toothy base compared to like a really silky merino and nylon sock blend. This color right here is Raspberry Cordial, and this color right here is Flower Crown. So it was a way to play with some color work, learn some techniques, and I'm glad I finished the pair. I don't actually remember what size I made, but I typically knit a 64 stitch count sock. I think they recommended like a 72 stitch count sock for my size, so I did that, and then I still found them a little bit loose on me. So again, not like a perfect fit, but they would be really good for nice cozy socks on a really cold day. But we've had kind of a mild winter so far. The next project I want to share with you is another pair of socks, and this is a design that I had. And these are the heart toe socks, and I just wanted to do something a little bit fun and whimsical and different. I picked this yarn from my stash because I really loved this color. I think this is 1989 from Sewrella Yarn, and it felt very Valentine's Day for me, and I ended up finding this red mini in my stash and contributing it to this sock. You can't see it quite perfectly on here, but if you look at the sock from the top, it's got a heart. And because there's a heart on the top and on the bottom, you can kind of see the heart on the side as well, though the shaping is not quite right from the side angle. Definitely need to see it from the top in order to get the full effect. I should have blocked it flat like that so I could show it easier. There's a big crease in the middle now. Super fun, super cute, really easy. I included the tutorial on my Instagram for free because it's a pretty simple pattern, and this was just like a fun little project that I was inspired to make, and so I made it. And then I shared it. It was just really fun. I am often not casting on and working on a project as soon as inspiration hits me. So I do want to do that more in this coming year in 2025. But this was an example of doing that in 2024, and it was just a lot of fun. We're moving our way into February, and I've got this shawl that I made for my daughter. Here's my test knit tip. If you want to test knit or test crochet, oftentimes there are more openings available for child sizes than adult sizes. So if that tester is designing multiple sizes, it's easier to get an in if you're doing a child size. So I volunteered to do the child size on this shawl, and I was selected for this test knit. This is the Pimpom shawl by Laura Penrose. It was a great way to use up some stash yarn. Let me show some of this detail. Look at those cute little pom-poms. Like, so adorable. Okay, they're not actually called pom-poms, baubles. Adorable little baubles. So I used Treehouse knits for this test knit for at least these two major colors, and then I used a little bit of my stash yarn to supplement the scallops. This is something from Knit Picks, but I honestly can't remember what yarn it was. It was just a random sock yarn in my stash that I thought would go color wise with the rest of the shawl. But I do want to talk about this Treehouse knits yarn because it is really beautiful. And this was like two colors that were intended to be paired together. This is another Galaxy, and then the purple is called Dusk. I did run out of yarn. I had 100-gram skein for both this main color and this edging color, and I just barely ran out. And I would have been able to do a little bit more of the scallops, but I designed the scallop coloring based on how much yarn I had, and I didn't want to have a couple random scallops or have like just one tail in one color, so I decided to just alternate as a way to make it look a little bit more balanced and to look a little bit more intentional. My daughter honestly doesn't care, and she didn't really care that I made this for her. She was really excited when I told her I made it for her or that I was making it, and then as soon as I gave it to her, she honestly didn't care. Hopefully, she will be in her shawl era sometime eventually, and she will really enjoy playing with this. It's not a bad size for me either. It's just definitely more on the small side, cutesy. I love these colors, and it was really fun to do this test knit and to do these baubles. I learned a trick where you take a loop from the stitch before the bauble, I think, and you basically loop it over the bauble to kind of cinch it in the back so it pops out a little bit more. And I've done that trick before on other projects of mine, but I don't make baubles a lot, so it was a good refresher, and it was just a fun project to knit on that was pretty mindless. I also made a cowl this month in February. This is the Blackbird cowl by Maggie Fangmann of Yarnaceous Fibers, and this was included in the Butcher and Blackbird book box, which is so cool. So pretty. This was color work. Maggie dyed the yarn, she wrote the pattern, and she included it as well as other goodies within this box so that as you read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver, you would open the packages, get some yarn, maybe get a piece of the pattern so you could, start on the cowl. It was a really fun experience. Honestly, it was my first book box from Yarnaceous Fibers, and I had a lot of fun with it. I don't wear this cowl very often, but I think that my daughter would really like it. Again, like I said, it's been a pretty mild winter, so I haven't felt the need to wear a lot of things to go out of the house, but you'll notice the ice cream section on top. If you know, you know. I also really love doing this Latvian braid on the top and the bottom. Again, a technique I've tried once or twice before, but I haven't done it a lot, and it was really fun to revisit that. I would love to grow in my knitting skills. This year was a very mood knitting, mood crochet type of a year, but I would love to challenge myself a little bit more in this coming year. Let's talk about a couple socks that I knit in February. This is another test. This is the Lightning Socks pattern by Carlie Perrins of Northwoods Knit Co. I test a lot for her because I really love, first of all, I love her patterns. I love that they often come in a collection of 3 related patterns. I think that's a really cool model that she's been doing. And I always have a lot of success working on her patterns as a test. I can trust her as a tester, that any mistakes will be minor and that she's really responsive and the patterns will be updated. I've just had really great experiences testing for her, and so I continue to volunteer and I continue to be chosen because I show up because I love it. This has just got a really fun little cable detail. That's really cute. And it's on the background of a ribbing texture, which is really fun. This yarn this will look familiar. I used Raspberry Cordial as a contrast color just because I had some left over and I thought it would be really fun and kind of bring out these magenta speckles that are really light throughout this main color. This yarn is from Speckled Finch Fibers in the color Eloise from Bridgerton, and I just really love this color. It was one that I was saving to use, and I'm really glad that I just did it because I really think it is beautiful. It was a great way to highlight this cable detail where it's really clear what I'm looking at, but then this yarn also has a chance to shine. Really happy about that. The last pattern for February I want to talk about is the Daedalus socks that I also tested, and I tested this for Kelly Menzies of Roro and Canes, and I've tested a few patterns for her. I've also made 1 or 2 patterns without testing them from her because I've enjoyed her style, but these are the DK weight version of this pattern. I know she has a fingering weight version out as well, and this was just a really fun mosaic knitting color work type of a design. I had originally picked different colors that had lower contrast but also had speckles, and it just wasn't showing quite how beautiful this design was, and so I had to kind of pivot. I think that this color combo really stands out, and I made them just in time for St. Patrick's Day because you gotta wear green on St. Patrick's Day, right? Anyway, I love mosaic knitting. I know some people don't love it a lot, but I think it's so fun and simple stripes, but with a little bit of flair, and I like slipping stitches. I don't know. I just like the movement of it. I also don't mind purling as long as I'm not constantly purling. Like a twisted rib works great for me. Maybe I'm a weird one. You'll notice that the white color, if you look closely, is kind of green tinged. And that's because I did not block this well. I had the water too hot. I forgot to use color catcher. I set myself up for failure. So some of the green did leach into the white background, but it leached pretty consistently, so it all works out just fine. But it definitely reminded me that I need to be more mindful when I am blocking and washing my makes so that I'm not having dye run over, because it's kind of impossible, especially with really saturated colors, to eliminate the runoff of some dye when you're washing. That's just how it is. So I'm not mad about it, but it was a learning lesson. This main color is from Dying Wishes Yarn Co. Sarah, and it is Before the Fall. And then the white was actually the Bear Yarn DK that I also purchased from her so that I could do some color work. And I was thinking I might make like a Christmas stocking. I have like a reddish color too from that collection. It never happened, but I still have some yarn left over, so I still might make something from it. But I found a use for it, and I am really happy with how this sock turned out. Let's move into March. I have another shawl test, but this was crochet. Oh, did I forget this was crochet? All of my stats will be down below and correct if I have been incorrect at any time in this video. But this is the Floret Shawl by Jessica of JSThreads. It's a really good size shawl, honestly. I don't want to cover up my microphone, but here you go. Cute stuff, right? And I am friends with Jessica, and so I was really happy to support her and make a design of hers. I used a bunch of stash yarn for this. I had not quite a mini skein set, but like a 30 to 35 gram skein set of this kind of bluish fade. And I also supplemented with a couple other scraps that I wanted to use to add to this fade. So that was really fun to get to use some of my stash yarn. And then I picked one specific color only to do this really cool lace detail. You can see there's like a starred flower type of design. Super cute. And I like the shaping. I'm trying to remember. You start on the long side and then you decrease steadily. It's in moss stitch, so also a really fun, really mindless stitch to do for crochet, and it's got a really nice drape to it. Moss stitch is a favorite, and you're decreasing pretty consistently throughout, so that was really nice that you started with the longer length and then decreased down, so it made the shawl go faster and faster as you went on, and then you added the border at the end. So this was super fun. This is definitely my color palette. I find myself not wearing a ton of shawls, but that's a personal problem. But I have a lot of fun making them, and so I don't see myself not making them because I'm not just a product knitter. I'm also a process knitter. Most of the yarn is from the Smooth Sailing Gradient set from Marianated Yarns that I bought at a local yarn store to me, Petit Fours and Pearls in Lehigh, Utah for the Utah Yarn Crawl the previous year in 2023, I think. And then a couple other random stash bits that I can't quite remember. I also have a project that I don't have to share with you, but I made an amigurumi that looks like Eevee from Pokemon. And this is a pattern by One Up Crochet. It is a free pattern because Pokemon is licensed, right? But I made this pattern for my, I guess technically it was for my sister-in-law. Technically it was for my nephew that was born earlier this year. It was one of the gifts I gave as part of a baby shower gift to my sister-in-law and her family for the baby. And so I have a picture. I remember finishing it up on a night shift, so I have a picture of it like on a counter in the hospital. But this was really fun to work on, and it definitely reminded me why I crochet, because I do a lot of amigurumi when I do crochet, and I forget how many skills I've grown in. Especially amigurumi crochet is a very different style of fiber arts than making like a crochet shawl or crochet blanket, but I've learned a lot over the years, and so I was still able to apply that knowledge to make this project, and it's one that I'm really, really happy with. So I was really happy to make this, and it brought me a lot of joy to crochet this, and I just need to make more time for amigurumi because I forget how much fun it is. The final March project I want to talk about is a pair of tube socks that I had been working on for probably like a year and a half, if not more. They were just kind of like an easy vanilla project that I hung on to in my whip basket kind of indefinitely. I didn't have a plan to finish it, and so they didn't ever get finished. But this yarn is from Backcountry Knitter, a local dyer to me. And I think I bought this yarn on the Utah Yarn Crawl as well in 2023, and then I cast on pretty soon thereafter. But I made a tube sock with this beautiful yarn. This is Texas Sky and Robin Egg. Ooh, I'm all twisted around. But this is totally my color palette. I really love these pastels, these blues, these purples, etc., etc. And I thought it would be fun to try making a tube sock because I've never done that. Basically, I knit a cuff, I put it on hold and cut my yarn, and then I knit another cuff, knit a very, very, very long sock and added a toe on the end, and then I cut that tube in half, added another toe on the end of the first half, added the first cuff back to the top of the second half. So now they just had toes and cuffs. And then I went in and I cut my yarn so I could add heels in. And it was just really fun. This type of heel doesn't fit me as well as like a heel flap and gusset, for example, but they still fit me all right. And it was just a really fun process to make. And so I see myself making a tube sock again in the future, but I don't have any plans to do so because this took me forever. Let's talk about a pair of vanilla socks that I made that also don't have the best fit. This is definitely a pair I want to fix, and I should probably make a goal to fix them pretty soon, or else it'll be a very long time yet that I fix them. But this is a pair of vanilla socks that I knit using Ruby and Rose's Castle by Day sock set. I don't know how well you can see, but they're sparkly yarn. I honestly can't see it at all on my camera, so hopefully you can see it. Here we go. There's some sparkle for sure. And it came with two minis, this white mini, this pink mini. Oh my gosh, I'm having fit issues. Can you tell? And I was inspired by Summerlee Knits, has a couple patterns with these fun stripes, and I thought it would be fun to throw some stripes in my cuff. The way to do this so that you don't have purl bumps is just when you switch to the new color, knit one full round, and that kind of resolves any purl bumps you have, and then you can continue in your ribbing pattern and it makes a really crisp, clean line. And I alternated both of these socks, so the toes and the heels as well as the order of the stripes differs on both socks. And you'll see I'm having a hard time fitting this on. The issue is my foot is too short, and so my socks, if they fit this sock blocker perfectly, will fit my feet just perfectly. But this, you can see the heel keeps sliding down because the foot is not quite long enough. I don't know, I need to add maybe like 5 or so rounds. So I haven't worn these very much because I wore them once and I realized my mistake. So I need to do some surgery, and I'm not quite sure if I want to cut the yarn, knit some more, and then just graft it together, or if I want to undo the toe and then add more yarn on the foot that way and then reknit the toe. I haven't decided which option I want to do. And so that's why they haven't gotten done yet. But I do have to fix these or else they're not wearable at all for me. If you want to see a video where I fix my projects that I have waiting around to be mended, then let me know down below and I can make that happen. I also finished another test knit in April, and this is the Skagit Valley Shawl. Let me see where the right side is. This is the Skagit Valley Shawl by Ashley of Goose and Ghost Knits. And this is a really great pattern for a sock set, which I really love, having sock set patterns that are not socks so you can try something different. There's a lot of really, really cool texture in here. So you start out doing like a couple little texture bits, then some stockinette, then some more texture, then more stockinette, then more texture all the way to the end and this cool border. So it was fun to have little breaks of stockinette in between this texture, but man, this is like really, really beautiful. I love this texture. It took a little bit of getting used to, especially these like clustered stitches, but I had a really fun time knitting on this pattern, and I really loved being able to use the sock set. I use, what's the yarn? This yarn is Great Basin Spring Sock Set by Yarnaceous Fibers. I bought this at the Great Basin Fiber Arts Fair in 2023, I think. And so it was really good to put this to use. And like, again, my color palette, pink with some purple, some green sprinkled in there. It makes me just happy to look at this shawl. In May, I finished another book box pattern from Yarnaceous Fibers, and these are the Underworld Garden socks that Maggie designed to go with the, what was the book called? A Touch of Darkness, I think, from the Hades and Persephone Romantasy series. Super, super fun texture with these like interesting bobbly type things. They're not baubles, they're something a little different. I also really loved doing color work on the heel flap to make it really sturdy, and it was just like a really fun, interesting experience. And this yarn is really beautiful, and I think black was Hades and Persephone was pink, and so it was just fun to see them mixed together in this sock for like a 2 mini skein sock set for that box. And I had a lot of fun reading the book in conjunction with this too. In May, I also participated in the Gnome News is Good News Mystery Gnome Knit-Along by Sarah Shira. I've loved participating in these knit-alongs, though I have missed the boat on a couple of them along the way these past few years, but I do have a handful of gnomes I've finished, and I have a handful that I have yarn picked out for that I haven't really made progress on. In my what pile, we're not talking about that. This is what I finished. Gnome News is Good News, and this is just like a fun little design. I like how his hat is all curvy and he's holding on to it. It's just fun and different than my other gnomes. It's a long, tall, skinny gnome. And this main color was actually Desert Vista Dye Works in the color Succulents, I think. This was the first gnome where one of the colors was intended to be a striped colorway. So that was really fun because I have a lot of stripy scrap yarn in my stash for sock yarn. And what I love about these gnomes is that you can use mini skeins for them. You can use scraps for them easily. So I always pull things from my stash to create a color palette for my gnome, and so it was really fun to be able to pull a self-striping colorway. In the month of June, I knit another test pair of socks. These are the Tea Leaf socks by Carlie Perrins of Northwoods Knit Co. Like I said, I test a lot for her. This was such a fun texture that involves some teeny tiny like slipped over or passed over stitches, some twisted stitches, some tiny cables that don't require a cable needle type of detail. So this was really, really fun to knit, and it's just like really cute. I did the ruffle cuff, which is a separate choice you can make regardless of what pattern you choose from this collection. I really think it's adorable. My daughter loved these socks, and so I ended up making her some later on in the year that I'll talk about. So cute. This yarn is Bella Fileto Studios in the color Pierhead Lights. Nice and subtle, which is perfect for these types of cable details, so you can really see this texture even with this like watercolory speckled look because it's just so light and pastel. A favorite color palette of mine. I also had a video about this pair of socks that wasn't a book box video, so I guess I should add this to my total projects featured in videos tally. These are the Surf Wax socks by Summer of Summer Lee Knits, and these socks were part of her sock project book that came out recently, and I did film a video where I read the book, I picked a pattern and knit it from the book, and I had a really fun time. If she comes out with another book, I think there might be one in the works, I will definitely be purchasing it. What's really funny is this pattern was calling to me with the stripes, but I wasn't ready to commit to making these socks. So I made those vanilla socks with the stripes in the cuff because I was really feeling the stripy cuff. And then I still ended up picking this pair of socks to make because I really love the stripy cuff and I really loved this texture. I used a Treehouse Knits sock set for this, though it came with 2 minis and I only wanted to use one for this pattern. But the sock set name was called First Flurries. There was like a gray color that also went with this, and I just didn't see the gray color fitting with the look I wanted for this pair of socks. Though I probably have to reknit the second sock because it is insanely tight and small compared to this sock. I don't know if I was really, really stressed. Let me show you. The socks are significantly different sizes and it's a problem, so I should probably just reknit the second sock because it is way too tight and small. You see, even up here, the cuff is tighter on the front sock. We line up the heels, like the leg is already that much longer on the first sock, so it's like a little bit looser, but the length is really where my gauge made a big difference. Look at that. It's like a whole fingertips length shorter because I knit so tight and I don't know why. So I should probably just undo, redo. I don't know what was going on, but the second sock I was really tense for. So I do need to fix this pair of socks as well. They're still wearable, but they're not super comfortable on that one foot. So I'd rather just redo them and make it feel more comfortable. The final pattern for June before we're halfway through the year is a pattern that I was gifted yarn for as part of an ambassador program. This is the Venetia Shawl by Joji Locatelli. It's a really awesome one skein project. It's a very, very long shawl, very, very thin shawl, so good for like a fashion type of a shawl, good for like a spring type of a shawl. Super cute. There's a lot of these twisted stitches and there's this really cool lace detail on the edge. It was really interesting how this design had increases in it. The shaping made my brain really happy. And so this was really fun to work on. This yarn is beautiful. Not saying that just because I was an ambassador, but this is from Kettle and Hearth Fibers. So for that 1 month, I was gifted a skein of yarn and I needed to use it and then share that project on my Instagram. So it was not a huge commitment, but I did have to make a project with it. And I got to choose which skein I use, like which colorway, which was really fun. And it introduced me to a new to me dyer that I have now purchased other yarn from because I really, really love their dye style. This was a really fun little project to work on. It definitely felt like it took a long time because I'm not used to using up full skeins of sock yarn. I'm used to using up like 50 or 60 grams to make a pair of socks and not use all 100 grams of it. So it stretched me a little bit in that way. We're halfway through the year. Let's take a look at another book box project that I knit. And this was actually designed by my friend Ashley of Goose and Ghost Knits. Let me find the front for you. This is the Cheyenne shawl. Like those drop stitches, such a really cool technique. And like the Skagit Valley shawl, there's these cool like almost clustered stitches that have been wrapped up. It's a different technique in this shawl than in the Skagit Valley shawl, but they're similar techniques. So that was really fun to work on, and I love these colors. This book box was for Dragon Teeth by Michael Crichton. It's a historical fiction that turns into like a Wild West story like halfway through, and it introduced me to Michael Crichton because I've never read his work before, and I read quite a few of his other books this year and had a lot of fun. I was really glad to have my reading exposure expanded because of this book box, because my book tastes don't necessarily align with Maggie's book taste exactly, but I tend to enjoy the books that I read that she picks because they're just a fun time. Whereas other book boxes that I've read have been hit or miss as far as my enjoyment of the book, even if I love the book box experience. But I've always enjoyed the books that Maggie has picked, and Dragon Teeth was no exception to that. This is a really fun design, and I really love the colors. We've got Black Hills, which I think is this variegated color, and then Great Fossil Lizard is the tonal. I really love everything about this shawl. The colors are great, the pattern was really fun, and it was just a really fun book box. I started like a bigger multi-object project, if that makes sense, in July, and this was to make a set of journey socks from every single colorway from Teeny Button's weekly countdown calendar from 2023. I had a different project in mind, but all the colors were really busy, and I didn't want to combine them all into one project because the things that I enjoy are a little bit more muted personally. And so I thought I would make a pair of socks from every single one of those skeins for the countdown calendar. So I started that in July. I've not quite finished that project, but I've made some good progress on it. I made some journeys, and this is the color End Papers. Oh my gosh, I love this color so much. It is stunning. Like, this is me. It's got beige, it's got cream, it's got pink mauve. It's so lovely. The journey sock pattern is by Heidi and Lana, and I've made a few pairs in the past. I made some adjustments. I think I might still need to make some adjustments to the heel because it still tends to slide down a little bit on my foot, but I've made some accommodations for my really high instep. So it's really comfortable down here and it fits on my heel, but I just feel like it's a little bit loose for me. So still got to play around with the fit for my foot, but it only comes in one size. So if you've made socks before, I think you could easily adjust this pattern for other sizes, but that is a disclaimer I want to share. Here is the point in the year where I missed a podcast somewhere, and so I started filming a little bit off schedule. And so I'm not sure which of these makes I finished in August and which I finished in September, but I've got a couple more pair of journeys I want to share with you. Again, from that Teeny Button calendar. Wah! Oh my gosh, close call. They are intended to be a fade together, so there's definitely some connection between all of these variegated colors, but they are all very distinct. And I can't remember which one is which. I'll have to look it up, but I'm going to say book plate and dust jacket, if my memory serves me. Who knows? Again, I knit them exactly the same as the other ones. So again, the heel, I'm having issues with wearing it for a while. It tends to slide down. So I got to figure out something a little bit better about the heel fit to make it a perfect shorty sock for me. I also had 2 test knits within this time period. I made the Leafy Transition Cowl by Alindria Knits Jennifer Ballou, I think is how you say her name. And I used a mini skein set for this pattern. This is mostly Lichen and Laces Lilac Retreat mini skein set that I bought on the Utah Yarn Crawl from the Needlepoint joint up in Ogden. But I did supplement with a couple of colors from my stash, like this is like my color of the year, I guess. Raspberry Cordial from Woolberry Fabric Co. This is the third project you've seen it in this year. I arranged them in a fade, added a couple colors. This one is from Treehouse Knits. Let's see what others I can recognize. And then this one is from Thirsty Cat Designs in the color Dust Bunny. Wow, I pulled that from way back in my mental archives. But I love this pattern. This got me out of a knitting slump. I love that you can knit like, I don't know how many rounds, 20 or so rounds, and then you would do like 4 rounds of something interesting to do these really cool leafy textured like dip stitches almost, and then you would just continue knitting forever until your mini skein ran out basically, and then do some transition rounds and continue on. There's a lot of mindless knitting, a couple rounds that were interesting and engaging as you were switching to a new color, so that was fun. It was very potato chippy, and like I said, this helped me get out of a knitting slump. It was so fun to knit, and I would definitely knit one again. It's intended to be used with mini skein sets, whether that's like a 12 skein advent set or a 24 skein if you want like a double long cowl you can like wrap it on itself. I'm sure you could adjust this pattern to use any number of colors and make it the length that you want it to be. Honestly, such a great pattern. The other pattern I tested this month, these are the Louise Lace Mitts by Rachel Raimo of Maven Handcrafted. Super fun little texture. Because they're mitts, they were a really quick knit, and I basically used just the leftovers of a ball of fingering weight yarn that I had. I can't remember exactly how much yarn I used. Less than 20 grams? It was a very small amount of yarn. I was surprised. I broke into a new skein just for like 2 yards of yarn to basically bind off. It was a really good stash buster. I knit the thumb when I picked up the thumb stitches exceedingly tight. So you can see my tension is different because it was just really hard in that tiny space to not be like too tight. So if I make this pattern again, I'll keep that in mind, but I love this texture. It was such a fun, quick knit, and there are multiple sizes within the pattern, so you can make them to match whatever hand size for an adult that you are aiming for. Last pattern from this August to September time period that I finished was the Musselburgh. And I've made this before. This hat uses Bird and Begonia yarn in the color like Rachel or Rachel. Not Rachel spelled in a way I'm familiar with, so I'm not sure if that's just a term I don't understand. But anyway, this is their older base. It definitely has a little bit more tooth to it, which is really fun to knit, though it does make it a stiffer hat, which is fine, but I don't necessarily like the like slouch at the top of my head because it's a little bit pointier than the other Musselburghs that I've made, which is okay. I still wear it a ton. I just tend to fold it up so that it doesn't have a slouch and I have extra ear warm. But I love this colorway with the cream and pink and the tan. This is not a self-striping colorway. This is just how it pulled. So on this side, it pulled with larger stripes. On the other side, it pulled in smaller stripes. So slightly different look on either side of my hat, depending on what I'm in the mood for, but super fun. This color palette speaks to me a lot, and so I've worn this hat a lot so far this winter. And it's just nice to have a pattern that I've purchased already, that I've made before, that's really simple, that I can make for any size I want, but I am already really familiar with my measurements. So it's basically like a vanilla sock at this point. So I've made a handful of those. I should make one for my daughter. I think she would really like that. She is about overdue for a hat because the last hat I made her still kind of fits, but it's really snug. So I think she would really like it if I made her another hat. Let's talk about the one garment I made this year. This is the Coachella Valley Button Up by Knits and Knots in Winnipeg, and this is really hard to show. I'll throw it on. I have steam blocked this collar, but it tends to roll up a little bit, so I think it needs a little bit more TLC. But look at these cute buttons. They're tortoiseshell, but they've got this little bit of pink on them. Cute. Cute, cute. Though, in retrospect, this is not really my style. I thought that I would wear this. Granted, I finished making it at the end of summer, and this is definitely a summer piece. I realized I probably wouldn't wear this as much. So maybe I'll do some looking around and see if anyone in my proximity would really love this, because I would be happy to gift this to someone who would wear it a lot more. But I can see myself wearing this a couple times a summer. Super cute, and it does make me feel kind of cool, actually. So who knows? I'm happy I'm putting it on right now, even if it doesn't necessarily go with my gray t-shirt. I use Knit Picks Woolen Cotton in the colorway Sean Heather. So it's a little bit of a beigey, grayish type of a color because I wanted something fairly neutral to make it easier for me to wear, especially with something that stylistically is a little bit outside of my normal style. It does button up if I want it to. I think I'll probably most often wear it open up as a layering type of a piece. It covers up my bum, so it's a little bit longer, very casual, kind of an androgynous fit. This is going to be part of Janine Miska's new book of her summer crochet patterns that is coming out in just a few months, I think. I think it's on pre-order right now. I'm definitely going to be purchasing it. I am part of her pattern testing email list, and there were some patterns I was interested in making, but I didn't have the supplies already, and I wasn't necessarily needing to make it right then. I really wanted to test crochet at least one of her patterns, and so when I saw this one, I was like, you know what, this one's really cool. I could see myself wearing this. So I went and got some yarn for it, and I was able to test crochet this. I want to have more pieces that fit kind of like this, that are just a little bit more dressy than casual t-shirt and joggers, because I've been wearing a lot of that recently. So kind of trying to branch out a little bit, and it was really fun to knit something like this. It's in pieces, there's some shaping, it is size inclusive, so I definitely recommend you check out Janine Miska of Knits and Knots Winnipeg if you have not made any of her things. She does knit as well, so she has knit patterns and crochet, but definitely more crochet patterns in her repertoire, and a lot of them stylistically suit what I like when I'm looking to make a garment for myself using yarn. So I would definitely recommend her. Another test project I made, but this one was a knit pair of socks. This is the sourdough socks pattern by Carlie Perrins of Northwoods Knit Co. She's a favorite of mine. And this is a DK sock pattern. It still smells like my wool wash because I had to wash a bunch of these socks for this video. I use that bear yarn that I got from Dying Wishes Yarn Co. for some contrast on the heels and toes. Oh, it's a little shifted over. But there's just this interesting cable detail running along the front. So it was a really simple and mindless knit for the most part because it was a very minimal cable crossing type of a detail. And especially in DK, it worked up really, really fast. She now has a fingering weight collection with this sock pattern in it in a fingering weight, which is really fun. I just didn't have time to test that pattern collection out, unfortunately. Let me see if I can show you the cable though. Ta-da! So yeah, really fun, simple cable. I would say this speckled yarn is not the best fit, but I really wanted to just use this yarn. And the more I knit with this yarn, the more I realized I liked some things about this yarn, but other things were not exactly what I was looking for in a minty green speckly yarn. Still on the search for my perfect yarn. There's just too much black and blue speckles in it for my personal tastes. I still like this yarn, but it's not one I'm obsessed with. This yarn is Winter Mint from Hypnotic Yarn. I don't have a membership with them, but they had some extras and I just purchased it because I was like, ooh, this looks like it would work up really fun. And yes, I like it, but again, too much of that blue and that gray, that is not me. I still like it, but not my favorite. I did another book box from Marianated Fibers, and this sock pattern was actually designed by Julianne Knitter of Twin Stitches Designs. Julianne, Le Bottinier. I don't speak French, can you tell? But this is the Crescent Shadows sock pattern. This was designed with Maggie's yarn in mind for this box, which was really, really fun. And it's color work. This is really cool. There was a toe up and a cuff down option, but I wanted to figure out my color work first and get that all figured out and then continue on with my stripes after I kind of determined my color palette. I did switch up the colors a little bit compared to what Julianne did in her pairs of socks, just based on what I wanted to for the specific images, like what I thought fit best. This book box was inspired by the first Crescent City book, House of Earth and Blood. I don't remember what the names of these books are because I inhaled them really fast. The first Crescent City book, the one with the red cover, I had so much fun and really loved it. Again, I just have such a fun time with the books that Maggie picked. They're always a really fun time. Ooh, can I remember what these mini skeins were? All of these colors were mini skeins except for the main color, which was a 50-gram skein. Honestly, I only remember that pink was Danica. I think orange was Bryce. The blue was Rune's Eyes or something like that. Maybe Crescent City was this green one. Star Sword was this gray. And I think this blue was something like Nightfall, something around there. Again, I'll make sure to have the correct information down below so that you can know what's going on. I don't necessarily think that Maggie is making these yarn kits outside of the book box, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the future you see them show up from her when she's like in a different dyeing mood, or she's pulling out some back stock or doing an in-stock sale or things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if you see this color palette. This sock is a much higher leg than I typically like in my socks, but I did want to include all the different color work charts as they were intended. And it's just got the fun stripes at the bottom, go through all the different colors. The final object that I finished in October time period is the modified version of the tea leaf socks by Carlie Perrins that I knit for my daughter. Look at this cute sock. Okay, look at this cute sock blocker. Look at this cute sock. I did a 48 stitch count sock for her, and I had to modify not only the total stitch count, but also the stitch counts for the pattern on the front of the sock. I just like knocked off, I don't know, maybe like 5 stitches on either side or something where it made the most sense. And then I just put in knit stitches where I needed to kind of like fill in the rest of that space. It honestly was not as hard as I thought it would be to modify the pattern. I've made a lot of socks before, so it wasn't a huge deal. It was just really fun. It's fun making small socks for my daughter because they work up really quickly. She has loved these socks to death. She really wanted white socks, and she really liked the sock pattern that I made. She liked the texture, and she loved the ruffle, and so she was really excited and kept asking me for these. So I knew that it wasn't just like a momentary urge to have white socks with ruffles. She really wanted them, so I made them for her, and she's been obsessed with them. They have seen a lot of wear. They've gotten dirty. So I don't know how long they're going to last, but my daughter loves them, and I think that she would be happy if I make her more pairs of ruffly socks. I also know that she wants me to make her some mittens with white yarn, and I think that that is still a thing she wants. 4-year-olds are very changeable creatures, right? So we'll double check, but you might see some cute little white mittens for me pretty soon. I got the sock blocker off of Amazon. There was just like a kid's set, so I have 3 different sizes. This is the medium kids size, so I'm assuming that the older kid size will be like a 56 stitch count type of a size. I use the smaller size for a 40 stitch count sock, and if I make like a 32 stitch count sock for a newborn, my husband actually 3D printed me a little sock blocker for that, and I don't know where that went because I haven't made any newborn socks in a while actually, but it's been really nice to have teeny tiny kids sock blockers, and they're just so cute. November was the time to finish some socks, and I actually had a couple designs that came out at the tail end of November for a countdown calendar box that Sarah of Dying Wishes Yarn Co. put together. So I designed both a fingering weight and a DK weight colorwork sock pattern. They are companion patterns, so the designs are very similar, just different weights of yarn, and so different counts, things like that. But I'm really excited about these patterns, and I'll make sure to link them down below if you are interested in purchasing them. If you did not get the box by Dying Wishes Yarn Co., this was inspired by like a vintage Winnie the Pooh type of design, and Sarah did an amazing job on this box. A little jar of honey. It came with a cool stitch marker from Tinker's Hollow. It came with this little card introducing like Pooh gets new yarn on this day kind of thing, and it had 5 different skeins in the box that I got from her, and they were all honestly really stunning. And the pre-order is coming up, so if you are interested, make sure to keep an eye out for that pre-order from Dying Wishes Yarn Co. if you are interested in any of those yarns, because they were honestly really stunning. First, I'll show you the fingering weight pattern. This is the one that the yarn is my palette. It suited me really well. Love this yarn. And I really love how the contrast turned out on this sock. So these are the honey pot socks by me. They've got buzzing bees that kind of are more concentrated, closer to the honey pot, and fade out through the top part of the sock. I've got some stranded color work also for the honey drips at the top of the sock for the cuff. And then I've got some duplicate stitching for the honey pot on the toe because it used less yarn to use duplicate stitching. It also made it a lot easier to make this sock fit well. And again, it just made it a much cleaner look to use duplicate stitching, and I thought it would be fun to include different techniques for doing color work. That's this sock. I think this yarn was a trap for heffalumps, and maybe like honey pot is the name of this mini color. I don't remember because I didn't include it on the pattern to avoid spoilers, but I should update those patterns to include all the colors and names because I haven't done that yet. I'm behind. Can you tell? I'm just behind. End of 2024, beginning of 2025. Life is just, you know, taking me out a little bit. And then the DK weight sock pattern. Ta-da! This is Tigger's Can't Climb Downwards, I think, is the name of the colorway. And then maybe Tigger for the contrast color. The contrast is not as good for this sock set compared to the last one for color work like this, but you can definitely see the honey drips and you can see the honey pot really, really well. But again, same idea with the other sock pattern. Duplicate stitching for the honey pot on the front. It's got the bees that are more concentrated near the pot and fade up through the sock, and some honey drips. Though because DK weight yarn doesn't stretch as far as fingering weight yarn, I did not include the contrast color for the cuff to ensure that every size, even if you make the large size, you should have enough of your contrast color to follow the pattern as I designed it. Though some people could squeeze by with their contrast color and continuing up through the cuff of the pattern. I've designed some socks in the past that include children's sizes, which I really love having completely size inclusive patterns, though these ones I did not have time to do children's sizes for, so maybe in the future you'll see some Honey Pot children's socks coming up, which would be so fun. I do want to read Winnie the Pooh to my daughter. She's right about that age that we can maybe start reading that together at bedtime, because her attention span for reading books at bedtime is getting a little bit longer, and to the point where we could read part of a book one night and part of a book the next night. Like, we don't have to read just in one sitting, and she could still remember what happens the night before. So we're kind of in that range where we might be able to try Winnie the Pooh. Again, I designed both of those sock patterns and I'm really pleased with how they turned out, and I did write them in a way that will make it easy for me to scale up and down with sizing. So I do intend to make other sizes other than the small, medium, large that I currently have for these patterns. So if you're interested in these socks, I'll definitely leave the links down below so that you can check them out. The last November pattern that I worked on was the Get the Scoop socks by Jennifer Ballou of Valindria Knits. There's some pilling here that I definitely need to take care of, but maybe my favorite project of the entire year. These were so fun to knit. So if you see, there's like this little scoop type of a stitch that makes this cool V. So I had a lot of fun knitting this pattern. It was very instinctive once I kind of got the pattern established. But I think the marriage of this yarn and this pattern is honestly perfect. I'm so happy about this. I used the Bisque sock yarn in the color Carousel, and then I just used like a Heritage Yarns black right here. And these are witchy Halloween vibes all the way. I don't necessarily think the Carousel colorway is intended to be like a Halloween color, but that's what it spoke to me with its purples and oranges. And so I made it into a Halloween pair of socks with the black, just kind of extending that. It's a really interesting self-striping colorway because it goes from like dark purple, fade to light, fade back to dark, and then switches to orange and then fades to light orange and fades back to dark orange. And so it alternates that way. It's really interesting. I've never worked with a self-striping yarn like that, and I really enjoyed that process. And for my second sock, I alternated. So I started at a different point in the striping pattern so that the colors line up in an offset way. So on one sock where it's orange, it's actually purple on the other sock. You can see it especially here on the leg. And it honestly worked out really, really well. I'm really happy about this. And yeah, I would say these are maybe my favorite pair because I finished them in time for Halloween. I got to wear them on Halloween and the colors just speak to me. And we finally made it into December. What did I finish in December? I had a couple of vlogs for Vlogmas where I talked about the things I was working on. I did finish all of my gifts that I was hoping to make. Yay! So excited about that. Though I did cut the timing a little bit close, but I did finish everything I was intending to for gifts. First off, I made some vanilla socks for my mom. I used Life in the Long Grass in the color Halcyon, and this was a really beautiful like maroon, gold, orangey red type of a variegated color. And I grabbed a random gold scrap ball that suited it perfectly to do a little bit of a contrast heel. I'm so glad that I looked in some of my old notebooks and I was able to find her measurements from when I made her socks a couple years ago. And she had told me that those socks fit perfectly like how she wanted. And so with my measurements, with my skinny yarn, I was able to make a vanilla pair of socks for her that fit her really well. And she loved the colors. Like, she kept talking about them, so I'm really happy about that. I ended up gifting her like a hand knit sock type of bundle, so I gave her sock blockers, some wool wash, a couple notions that I have liked using in the past with socks, so that as she's on her journey to knit socks, she can use those things to knit socks or for other purposes as well. Or she can also, hand wash her socks that I've made her. She doesn't necessarily have to knit her own, because she is starting to practice knitting because she wants to be able to knit socks in the future. I also knit the Urbana scarf by J.H. Walter for my dad. I used some Malabrigo Arroyo for this in the color Fresco y Seco. It's this beautiful green, blue, tonally variegated type of a yarn, and I held it double to make this scarf since it is an Aran weight pattern and the yarn was like a sport weight or very light DK. Held it double. It worked perfectly. I just knit until I finished all 4 skeins that I purchased, and I made sure to do some alternating so there wasn't any kind of stark changes as I was switching to new skeins of yarn. I really, really enjoyed this pattern, but making a cabled scarf takes a really long time, and I was not prepared for how long it would take for me to knit that big of an object, even in Aran weight yarn. So that was on me, but I did finish it in time for Christmas. Woo! Maybe like 3 or 4 repeats in, I figured out how to do the cables in the center of the scarf without a cable needle. So that was really nice. I was able to do that, just a little less fiddly. But then every like 10 rows, I still had to do the big cables on the sides. But it got really intuitive, so I could just like go every night before bed, and when my dad was like out of the house, because I was staying with my parents leading up to Christmas. So it was quite the adventure trying to finish in time, but I finished it on Christmas Eve, was able to box it up and put it under the tree. I'm really glad I'm done, because that again took a lot longer than I anticipated. The final project I want to talk about is actually 3 finished objects, and these are the last things I was able to finish in 2024. And these are the Christmas Eve socks that I made for my immediate family, for myself, my husband, and my 4-year-old. And I had done this in the past. I didn't get to it last year, but I was really excited to try to make it happen this year so that Christmas Eve we could open matching socks and wear them to bed with our matching pajamas. My daughter was really excited about these socks and really wanted to open the socks and the pajamas early. It was really hard to wait for her, but I did finish these on Christmas Eve as well. I, again, didn't have my pacing quite right because I was busier earlier in the month. So even though I started the very end of November, I still had a ways to go when we actually arrived in New York about a week before Christmas. So I had to go really fast. But because they're socks, I could take them with me on the go, and they weren't necessarily a secret for any of my family. And so I didn't care about working on them in front of my daughter or my husband. So it worked out just fine. I knit the Lights on Main sock pattern by Kim Jackson of Hooga Canyon. You can see there's some slip stitches, elongated slip stitches throughout. It's most of the texture. There's some other texture right here next to the cuff. I use my own personal stitch counts for all of these socks, but I follow this pattern by Kim Jackson. This yarn, I was so excited to use this. I'd had this project in mind with this yarn for a long time, and so I'm really glad I could finally get it done. This is Witchfire Fibers in the color Search for the Perfect Tree and Verdant. So I bought 2 skeins of the main color and 1 skein of the contrast, so I would have plenty for my whole family to have matching socks. I knit my socks first because I was the only one who wanted tall socks, and I figured they would take the longest. They did, but not because they were like the biggest, mostly just because they weren't a priority. In retrospect, I think next time I will knit other people's socks first so that mine can be the very, very last ones to finish, because if mom's socks don't get done in time for Christmas Eve, that's okay. But I didn't want to ruin Christmas for the rest of my family. Next, I knit my husband's socks. He wanted shorty socks, and so I knit him some shorties. His foot is the same width as mine, but definitely longer, so they don't quite fit on these sock blockers. Plus, I forgot to wash his socks before this video, and he's been wearing them, so they're a little bit looser. But yeah, he needed like 10 or 15 rounds longer than mine, and he only wears ankle socks. That was really nice to finish, and I had forgotten how long I needed to make them, so he had to try them on. But once I got the first sock done, I could just copy for the second sock. So it worked out okay to not have too much like back and forth, trying them on, taking them off type of a thing, but he's really happy with the fit. I also finished fixing the 3 socks that have had holes in them for like more than a year. I finally fixed those on this trip too. So he technically got 2.5 pairs of socks for Christmas. And then my daughter's pair, again, the pattern does not come with a 48 stitch count size, but I could easily adapt the pattern for her sock. She was a little sad that her heel wasn't dark green like mine. I tried to make all the socks a little bit different in the way that I broke up the colors, but she didn't like that. So maybe next year I have to make them match with my socks. So it's mostly an ankle sock with just an extra cuff so that they'd hopefully stay on her legs a little better. But I think she'd be happier with a little bit shorter of a leg too. We'll see kind of what she likes. But she went through a phase where she would not wear any of the socks I knit her, and now she's starting to wear them again with the ruffle socks that I showed you earlier, the tea leaf socks. And between this pair of socks, she's been wearing them a lot more, so I think I'll be making her a lot more socks in this next year. I have quite a bit of the verdant left over. I don't know where I put it, so I can't pull it out, but I barely used the second skein of the main color. I did not have enough of the first skein to finish the pair of socks for my daughter, so one sock is from the tail end of the first skein, and I had, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 grams left of that skein. So then I cast on the second sock with the second skein. And the color is really different because, again, hand-dyed yarn. I don't know how well you can see that. This sock is distinctly darker than the first sock, which is just kind of funny how it worked out, the way that the variegation worked up. This was from the first skein of yarn, and this was the only sock of this whole set from the second skein of yarn. So I'm glad I bought the amount of yarn that I did, but now I have quite a lot of that second skein, and I'm not sure what to make with it. We'll see, but you might see it in another bigger project like a shawl or something later on. All right, there you have it. The 40 things that I finished in the year 2024. Lots of talking, lots of chatting, lots of sharing, all the things. I was really excited to take a look at everything that I made because, especially in the moment, it feels like I'm not knitting and crocheting a lot just because I have a lot of other things taking time from my life. But I actually did make quite a bit, and I'm really excited about some projects, both some whips and some things I really hope to cast on soon. And I'm just really excited to share them with you. So let me know down below what were your favorite makes of the year. I think between the Cheyenne shawl, the Get the Scoop socks, and the Lights on Main socks that I knit for my family, those were my favorite patterns that I worked on this year. Though I have lots that I really, really enjoyed and lots of things that I also learned. Let me know down below if you've made any of these patterns or if I sparked your interest and you would like to try any of these patterns, and let me know down below what your favorite make was from 2024. Thank you so much for watching this video and for joining me on this cozy journey as I share all things fiber arts and books related here on this channel. If you'd like to follow along for more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification as I post consistently but very irregularly between my nursing schedule and being a mom. So I'd love to have you join me here. We are almost at 2,000 subscribers. I will have another video coming soon where I talk about my 2025 knitting and crochet goals, because 2024 I didn't make any goals, and I feel like that impacted the making that I did this year. So I would like to be more intentional about the things I hope to get to in this year. So make sure to keep an eye out for that video and other videos coming soon. I've got lots of content planned, especially for this month in January, as we are starting the new year and reflecting on the old one. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Happy making! Bye!